Delighted to be here, and hello to, what was it, 500 people about online as well out there in the ether somewhere. It's funny actually, it's one of the good legacies from COVID, the fact that, you know, there's 250 people here and there's another 500 people out there in touch. We weren't able to do that before COVID, so it is one of the good things that came out of it, that there's that kind of connectivity happening. So just a brief overview of what I want to talk about today. I just want to talk about framing the challenge, the water challenge, a little bit first. Then a bit about the National Water Forum, a summary of our recommendations for the Third River Basin Management Plan, and some conclusion remarks then. So, wicked problems. You've all heard the term wicked problems, I'm sure. And water problems are wicked problems. Now, there's loads of definitions you'll find about wicked problems, but there are two things I found last week when I was just getting ready for the talk, which I really liked, because I think they kind of summarise the challenges that we're dealing with in the water area. Wicked problems are complex and extremely hard to solve because of incomplete, contradictory and changing requirements. They usually, one, involve multiple stakeholders whose values are different, sometimes even opposite. And the Water Forum is a great example of that, because we've got a range of stakeholders going all the way across the different sectors with an interest in water. And they've different perspectives. So, you know, that's what the forum is. Two, they lack definite formulations of the causes. And three, have solutions that are not right or wrong, but can be better or worse. And then there was another lovely quote I came across there as well. There is no recipe or set of protocols you can use to solve a wicked problem. A wicked problem is economic, social and environmental dimensions that interact with one another in ways that are ever-changing and unpredictable. This is starting to sound familiar. As a result, many wicked problems are never completely solved. Instead, the best one can hope for is a process of continual improvement in addressing the issue. Now, unfortunately, from what we heard from Mary earlier, we're not really seeing the continual improvement yet in the water area. So, you know, it is a wicked problem, but we're not even getting the continual improvement right now. So we do have a big problem on our hands here. So, climate change, ecosystem management, catchment management, they're long recognised in the literature as complex and wicked problems. And actually, if you look at the list of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, they're all wicked problems, the whole lot of them, because they all involve a complex mix of economic, social, and in many cases environmental and cultural issues as well, and involve multiple stakeholders. So in framing the challenge then, well, it is a wicked problem, first of all. It's very much intertwined, the catchment management, it's really intertwined with climate and nature, and it's great to hear the Minister talking about that this morning. And you could tell from the way he was talking about it that he believes it as well, that those three things need to be better connected: water, climate and nature. There are many stakeholders involved with different perspectives, and I think really importantly, there's no easy answers, and no one entity has a monopoly on wisdom or knowledge in this area. Everybody's voice is important, everybody's voice needs to be heard. So this is kind of my go at, you know, what's the pathway to successful agreed outcomes in any of these areas. The first thing is co-creation, is stakeholders in the public have to be involved in framing the problem, in talking about potential solutions, but also in identifying that, like, a solution may not work. So you have to experiment, you have to play around a little bit, you have to be willing to fail in order to learn. Compromise, we all need to give a bit to get a bit, and like with the co-creation and compromise happening together, that's where you get the common ground, which is the sweet spot. And I'll talk a bit about that more when it comes to the forum and the work of the forum. The biggest challenge of all is implementation. You know, you get to the point, you've got a plan, you've got all the actions sorted out, you've done all the analysis and all the rest of it, then you have to implement it. And like in the collaboration bit is really important here. It's important in the other elements too, but it's particularly important here. And I'd just like to get you thinking about a term, collaborative implementation, for the next cycle of the River Basin Management Plan. there's been a lot of collaboration happening in the last few years. It did get knocked back a bit by COVID, there's no doubt about that, but it's going to have to be stepped up big time if we're to turn the corner on all the water issues. And the oil that lubricates all of this stuff is trust, engagement, and a bit of humility thrown in as well. We all think we're brilliant here. We know so much about the topic that we're expert in or whatever, but we don't know everything. So a little bit of humility thrown into the mix is no harm. So to the forum then, we're the national statutory body representative of all stakeholders with an interest in the quality of Ireland's water bodies. There are 25, there's actually 24 members at the moment, nominated from over 50 organisations. It provides the opportunity for stakeholders to debate and analyse a range of issues. So there's a lot of debate, potential for the stakeholders to discuss anything in relation to water. And of course it strays into climate and nature, economics, social stuff all the time because you've got a range of stakeholders there. And I think the third thing there, the unifying platform, I think is a really important one here. It is a unifying platform to try and unify the different perspectives that people have to come to some sense of common ground. We do have a statutory advisory role, which is really important. We're there to give statutory advice to the Minister and the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, which is where water currently sits, to the Water Policy Advisory Committee, to Uisce and to the Commission for Regulation of Utilities. So that's a very, very important role for the forum. The members then, you can see the names are all listed there, and there are 14 of us here today, so there's quite a good representative, and I know several others are watching from the sky somewhere out there as well. So in agriculture, there's Dennis Drennan, Derry Dillon, Dominic Cronin and Paul O'Brien, and Dominic and Paul are here today. Angling Martin McEnroe, who just lives down the road from Athlone, who's here today as well. Business Neil Walker, I'm the chair. The community and voluntary sector, Gerald Quain and Izzy Petrie, and Gerald is here today with us. The education sector, Suzanne Linan, and then the environment sector, Bernie Connolly, Olan Hare, Sinead O'Brien, Elaine McGough, and Charles Stanley Smith. And as you'd expect, there's a very good turnout from the environment sector here. So everyone is here except Sinead, who is watching online. How are you, Sinead? The forestry, Brendan Fitzsimons, who is here as well. The general consumers, Connie Rochford and Keith Hyland, both of whom are here. The National Federation of Group Water Schemes, Barry Dean and Jean Rosney, who is here. Recreation, Tim Butter. The Rivers Trust, Siobhan Ward, who many of you in the water area will know. Social Housing, David Wright. David is here wearing shorts. I just saw him there. I thought, God, that looks very comfortable. I wouldn't mind wearing shorts now myself at the moment either. I will be later. And then Tourism, Tim Fenn. So I just wanted to introduce the people to you, because it's the people or the forum, and then the secretariat, all of whom are here except Martina Ryan, so Donald Purcell, Trina McGrath, Greta McCarran and Aisling Corkery are all here. So it is the people that is the forum. Like the forum, yeah, it's a statutory body and all of that kind of stuff, but it's the people that make it. So, what happened there? Oh, there we are. We're okay. Something happened to my screen here in front. So we are stronger together than apart. My thing is flashing up here at the moment. I don't know if you can do anything about it, but I'll have a look at the screen over here anyway while that's flashing away. We're definitely stronger together than apart. Broad range of perspectives in the forum because it's different stakeholders. But the point I really want to make is that when the forum agrees on something, others need to listen, because it's not easy to reach agreement on complex topics. So when we do reach agreement and that finds its way into advice and recommendations, then others really do need to listen. common themes that come up again and again in our submissions, and you'll see this coming through in the submission on the River Basin Management Plan as well. Transparency in data decision making and trade-offs. We talk a lot about trade-offs because we've got people looking at the economic side, the social side, the environmental side. Governance comes up again and again. Effective governance, transparency and engagement as a governance issue, improved engagement, collaboration and resourcing. Policy coherence, we talk about that a lot, and really what that boils down to is that thing about, well, better connectivity between water, climate and nature, and economic and social and cultural issues too, but particularly the water. If we can get the water, biodiversity and nature a bit tied better together, that'll be a good day's work. And then effective engagement, both stakeholder engagement and public engagement. So even though the forum is a stakeholder forum, it's got a big interest in giving advice on how to improve public engagement with the public as well. So our own submission then, there are 103 recommendations agreed by all the members. Imagine that, like getting 24 people from all sorts of different backgrounds and sectors agreeing on 103 recommendations. That's a big deal. The recommendations are grouped into outcomes-based approach, governance, public participation, and then there are recommendations for every sector in those recommendations too. So I'm just going to touch briefly on the outcome-based approach, the governance, the public participation in particular, and just one or two comments on the sectoral pressures. The engagement we've had on this, because it's one thing making a submission, right? You just make your submission. But since we made the submission, we've made presentations to Ministers O'Brien and Noonan, presentation to the Joint Oireachtas Committee. We've provided 2 sets of advice to the Water Policy Advisory Committee, which haven't been done before. Like, this was the first time that the Fóram actually gave statutory advice to the Water Policy Advisory Committee. We presented to WPAC, sorry, I keep hitting that there with my hand. And then towards the end of the year, we also provided advice to the 2 ministers, O'Brien and Noonan. So they're all in relation to how the development of the plan is going, following the 6-month period of consultation that was open to everybody. And we are getting ongoing engagement with the officials in the department, and that is great. It's a reflection of the fact that the forum is seen to be different, because it is a consolidation of views of a whole range of stakeholders, many of whom will have made their own submissions as well. Like Swan, for example, would have made its own submission. The Farmers Association would have made its own submission, you know. But the commonality, the common ground is seen by David and his colleagues in the department as something different because of the fact that it's been agreed. So the outcomes-based approach. Now, if there was one thing that I wanted you all to remember in this, and David in particular, as he's considering finalising the third River Basin Management Plan, is that for the third plan, all water bodies need targeted measures to either protect or restore to good ecological status. All water bodies need targeted measures. The water bodies that need to be protected need targeted measures as much as those that need to be improved. Now, for very, very good reasons, the second River Basin Management Plan had a very strong focus on improving, okay, and the areas for action were set up, and there was loads of really good work done on all of that. But for the third plan, the protect function needs to get an equal billing as the restore function. And I think the fact that we're going to have the 46 catchment plans, which Bernie will be talking about after me, will make that easier as well. The KPIs are needed, timelines, justification for water bodies must be outlined, and details to be included in the 46 catchment plans, which we'll hear about in a minute. But it's that point about all water bodies, I suppose, probably one of the most important things I wanted to get across to you. In terms of governance, we've recommended a full-time River Basin Management Plan Secretariat to manage implementation. Again, the department agree with this, but it's always difficult to get additional resources. But without that, it's going to be very hard to oversee and coordinate implementation. Transparency in decision-making, structured engagement between the three tiers. We have recommendations about all of these various different things. Opportunities for the forum to engage with the three tiers to allow stakeholder input into implementation. That is happening, actually, pretty well now at this point. The missing bit really was our engagement with WPAC, and we've got that agreed now as to how that will be done. And then an interdepartmental financing strategy was something I think might have been in the programme for government, I can't remember exactly now, but that really needs to happen, and I'm not sure there's been great progress in relation to that. Public participation, a national approach, we're recommending a national approach for public participation to develop stakeholder visions and action plans for the 46 catchments. Bernie might tell us a little bit more about that. These would all require a framework to work for local authorities and agencies to work together. Across, again, water, biodiversity and climate change. Might need more resources at some point, but I think the first step there is to make sure that existing resources are being used most efficiently. And then we recommend this be piloted, and it is going to be piloted, and Bernie will be telling us a bit about that. The pressures then, just very quickly, like this is just, you know, there's quite a number of recommendations about the individual pressures. But just like for agriculture, we're recommending some kind of an independent review of the CAP and NAP because there is so much reliance on them to deliver for agriculture. In hydromorphology, or what was the term we're going to start using again on it? The flowing rivers, yeah, better flowing rivers. Development of a national framework and guidance for river restoration. Forestry targeted measures to address the 233 water bodies at risk from forestry, and urban wastewater, actions to address those 208 water bodies at risk that Mary showed on her slide. So just a couple of concluding remarks then. The next 6 years, well, yeah, they are very critical because they're the third cycle in a water framework directive that originally envisaged having 3 cycles. Now, of course, this is going to go on and on and on. If this wasn't a wicked problem, most of Europe would have had good water quality in 2015. Clearly it doesn't, you know, so it is a wicked problem. We'll never stop doing this kind of catchment management planning. Building trust through engagement, a bit of humility will help us get there. A transparent outcomes-based approach incorporating all water bodies is a crucial element. The protect and improve principle there. There are more resources needed. I was interested to hear about the call for more local authority resources, and I think there is a business case being worked through the department on that at the moment in terms of the third cycle. The policy coherence issue, really important across water, climate and nature. And then in terms of the forum, we will continue to advocate for our recommendations to be part of the plan. And once the plan is made, we'll get straight into implementation and supporting the implementation of it. But possibly also continuing to advocate for anything we feel is missing. We're not going to stop advocating, being a bit of a squeaky wheel on that as we move into implementation. Thank you very much.